Summer rose light over the Idaho panhandle, a thin veil of mist and the quiet noise of water moving past stones. Eleanor Brooks, 23, crouched at the edge of the Priest River to frame a shot of a kingfisher on a leaning branch. The sand looked firm. It was not. Her right boot broke the crust and sank. The left followed before she could shift her weight. The riverbank took her like a slow breath. "Help, please." Her voice startled a deer in the alders. The camera fell, strap half buried. Sand and silt climbed to her thighs. She fought to stay still, but fear taught the body to thrash. Brush cracked. A man came out of the willows, moving with a brisk, practiced focus. Flannel shirt, sun-faded canvas pants, scuffed white at the knees, boots that had known miles. His jaw had the unshaven shadow of a few days. His eyes were the dark color of wet bark. "Do not fight it," he said, steady and low. "Keep your arms loose." He threw a coil of rope around a birch trunk that leaned over the river, tied twice at his waist, and crawled flat toward her, spreading his weight. "Give me your hand. Do not pull. I will do the work." His palm found hers. He leaned back, heels dug deep, breath measured. The riverbank complained and let go. Inch by inch, she came free. Her boots tore up with a sucking sound. He drew her onto a patch of grass with roots like netting. She sagged, and the world spun. He caught her and eased her to the ground. "You are not hurt anywhere else." He did not make it a question. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. He touched his knuckles to her cheek, then 2 fingers to the pulse at her wrist, and then to the left of her sternum, not pressing hard, only enough to feel the steady rhythm. "You are all right," he said, almost to himself, as if he had to hear the words to believe them. The clouds drifted. The kingfisher flew. The river went on. He lifted her and carried her up the slope to a small cabin tucked into a stand of tamarack and fir. That was the first time Eleanor met Mason Reed. She woke to the smell of pitch and wood smoke. The ceiling was a puzzle of old boards. Daylight slid through canvas patches where the roof had once leaked. Outside, water spoke in a quick whisper. Inside, someone turned a piece of wood in strong hands. He sat near a small stone hearth, back to her shoulders, loose and ready. "You are awake," he said, not turning. "Where am I?" "My place. You passed out. You were cold." She tucked the jacket close around her. "Thank you." "I am Lena." The name came fast and safe. "Mason." The room was not much in the way a good pair of boots is not much. A table made of split rounds, a shelf of chipped enamel bowls, a row of tools hung on nails, a line of curled birch bark. Bundles of plant stems hung to dry near the window. There was no hum of machinery, no phone on the table, not even a watch on his wrist. Later, when she smoothed her tangled hair, she found a small object on the blanket beside her. A comb, cut from smooth cedar teeth, sanded thin back, curved to fit a palm. No note. She touched the grain and felt her breath catch on something soft in her chest that she did not have a name for. The next days learned her a rhythm she had not known in years. Morning meant the creak, a call of an osprey, the rasp of a saw. Mason split rounds with clean swings, stacked wood in even rows, trimmed spoon blanks from scrap. He wore silence like an old shirt. He did not refuse conversation. He simply did not spend words he did not need. By day 3, she could walk without wobbling. The ankle was tender, and the bruises colored like old plums, but the air held a clean cool that made healing easier. She tried to help. Mason let her. She held boards while he fetched a bucket of water, cleaned trout with a small knife that had the shine of many sharpenings. In the afternoon, they patched a corner of the roof. She hit her thumb and bit back a sound. He took her hand without fuss, tore a thin strip from a cloth, and wrapped the thumb with neat turns. "Do not prove anything," he said. "You already are enough." The words sat in her ribs like a warm stone. That night they ate by firelight. They did not touch. They did not need to. The comfort in the room was the size of the room itself. On the fifth morning, Mason left with a small pack and his fishing rod. Elena waited and then followed far enough that her footfalls would not carry. He did not go toward the river. He walked under the long arms of a ponderosa pine that rose from a gentle slope bark, flaking in orange plates, the trunk wide as a kitchen table. He sat at the base and closed his eyes. He stayed that way a long time. Hands laced chin, tipped down. It looked like prayer or the discipline that comes after a broken kind of faith. The next day she went alone. Wind combed the needles, and the bark smelled of vanilla when the sun warmed it. At the root bowl, her fingertips struck metal. She scraped away needles and dirt, and found a rusted ammo box. She hesitated, then lifted the latch. Inside were folded papers, stiff and stained. A few name tags with blue tape and bold marker letters. One old photograph of 12 men in yellow shirts lined shoulder-to-shoulder faces, squinting smoke at their backs. She picked a page. "Tyler, you were supposed to be home that week. Saxon said he would trade shifts with you. You told him to take his girl camping. We left at dawn with the crew, and the air already tasted like pennies. You laughed at the way the dust stuck to the coffee." She read another. "Connor. I should have called it. I should have said no and pulled us out. But the radio chatter never came. The wind threw sparks like nails. I still hear your voice, then nothing. Then a page that froze the air behind her eyes. The company knew the radios dropped signal on the ridge and signed off anyway. Meridian North cut the safety line items to push a contract. Charles Brooks signed the silence. She did not feel the wind while she kept reading. When she did, it was as if it had been there the whole time, breathing with her. Charles Brooks, her father, chairman of Meridian North. The man who told her at 12 that the world respected results and that the rest was noise. The man who insisted that true North was profit because profit paid for hospitals and stadiums and scholarships, and no one wanted to talk about how scholarships were made. Elena folded the pages back into the box with careful hands so they would not tear. She put the lid on and replaced needles on top. She stood at the base of the pine with a throat that refused to choose between apology and anger. Neither would fit yet. She walked back to the cabin with her jaw set. That evening they ate fish and cornbread. Fire colored the wall. She placed both palms flat on the table. "I lied," she said. "My name is Eleanor Brooks." Mason did not move. "Charles Brooks is my father." She added, her voice steady, because it had to be steadier than the house around it. He set the small carving knife on the table as if it were hot. His eyes were not anger yet. They were the still surface before the wind. He looked at the fire, and then at her. "I read the letters," she said. "I know what he signed. I am not him. I do not want to be the person who keeps that silence." He stood with both hands on the table. The boards under his boots made a small sound. He turned and stepped away from the light. When he answered, his voice was the one he used when the rope went tight. It held. "All right," he said. He did not say more. Outside, shadows lengthened. Somewhere below, a set of tires found the start of a narrow road. They arrived in the last of the light. 3 men in dark jackets cut straight lines through brush that grew soft curves. Behind them came Charles Brooks. The years had polished his silver hair to an argument. The suit did not belong here. and did not care. "Eleanor," he said, like a command to a dog who did not heel. "We are going home. Enough foolishness." "This is my choice," she said. "I am not going with you." He flicked a gaze at Mason as if picking a splinter out of his sleeve. "This man wants something from you. He wants your name." Mason stepped so Elena was behind his shoulder. "She goes where she chooses," he said. Charles lifted 2 fingers and 2 of his men moved. One raised a hand to shove Mason, who answered with a strike that knocked the man into the brush. The second swung. The first rose. It took 3 seconds for the fight to turn into something heavy. The third man moved to Eleanor. She backed up, tripped, kicked, and felt hands on her arms. There was a hiss and then light. Someone had taken a road flare from a jacket pocket. The flare kissed the edge of the old canvas. Flame leapt as if it had been waiting for an invitation. Pitch caught. Heat rolled. Mason staggered in the door and came back out again fast. Smoke wrote its black letters above the roof line. "No." Eleanor pulled against the grip on her arms. Mason turned toward her, and the look that passed between them did not hold a single word. The cabin gave in with a dry roar. The roof fell. Sparks went up like a flock of startled birds. Then the men pulled Eleanor toward the road, toward the black car, toward the glass world that had never felt more like a cage. The penthouse overlooked a clean grid of avenues and rectangles of park that seemed to have been placed there only so people could say there was green. Security took her phone. Assistants reset her passwords and locked her email. Her father said nothing about the fire. He spoke in a tone that had closed deals and opened museums. "You are untethered right now," he said. "A few weeks of fresh air do not change blood. Your work is here." She slept. Poorly. The air never cooled. At night she wrote letters to Mason on cheap paper with a pencil she hid inside a rolled pillowcase. She told him the small things that kept a person inside a day. The way the building sighed. The way the city light lay in bars on the rug. She folded the letters and put them in an old wooden cigar box she had kept since high school because it smelled like another life. One morning she found a small package outside her bedroom door. No name. Inside, wrapped in brown paper, lay a square of fabric singed at one corner. On it were 12 names embroidered with simple care. Not perfect. Beautiful because they were not perfect. Tyler, Connor, Marco. Others she had not read yet. A note written in a hand that was square and sure. Found this under the ash. You should have it. Do not forget. No signature. She did not need one. She made a decision that had waited in her blood since the pine. She left before dawn, with a knit hat pulled low, and a maintenance elevator key she had taken from the desk, the way a person takes a breath. A rideshare to a bus to a smaller bus to a town where the convenience store sold coffee you could stand a spoon in. Then she walked. The pine was there. The smell of its bark made her throat hurt. The ammo box came up out of the earth and into her arms, and then into a motel room, where a lamp buzzed and the bedspread was a suspicious plaid. She read every letter from the first to the last. She wrote beside them. Not explanation, not apology. The truth she could carry without dropping. I am the daughter of the man whose signatures made the cut. I am also the person you did not watch die on a riverbank. I was pulled out. I will not let your names sink. She titled it, Letters at the Pine. She sent it to 12 places. 11 said no. The 12th was a newsroom on the second floor above a coffee shop with wobbly tables. It was called the North Line Ledger, and it was kept alive by Ruth Delgado, who had reported on wars and floods, and by Evan Price, who wore a wedding ring and carried a spiral notebook everywhere, because it made him feel like he could still fix something. They posted Elena's manuscript a little after 9 at night. By morning, the site had slowed to a crawl. By afternoon, the site learned to stand again. By the end of the second day, 2 million people had read it. Firefighters left comments. Widows wrote emails. A teacher in Utah printed it for her civics class. The name Meridian North appeared in headlines. Congressional staffers requested interviews. The state attorney general scheduled a meeting that was not a meeting in name. Elena watched it all unfold and felt the strange mix of terror and relief that comes when a lid blows off a pot that has rattled for years. Her father's counsel stood up before cameras and did what counsel does. Phrases like misleading statements and out of context and unfortunate accident spoke in clean suits. Then someone released an old audio clip of a crew briefing from the year of the fire. A quiet voice in the background said the backups were down. Another voice said, "Run it anyway." The quiet voice belonged to Mason, a younger version of him. The answer came from a manager who now had a title so long it had to be shortened. Charles Brooks was charged with obstruction and destruction of evidence. The day of the verdict, Eleanor sat in the back of a courtroom that smelled of copier toner and old wood. He did not look at her. The sentence was not what some people wanted, and more than others believed possible. She stood when the words ended and walked outside and breathed air that did not come from a vent in the ceiling. She rented a small apartment above a bookshop near the city edge. She took freelance work, shooting for local papers, and writing small stories about the people who carried hoses and radios and did not get handshakes on parade days. She took the money left to her by a grandmother who had taught her how to sew a seam and started a fund. The Mason Reed Fund would pay for grief counsel, legal help, and quiet bills that go unpaid when a family loses a person who worked a job that was always 2 inches from danger. The paperwork was dull. The work was not. The first memorial the fund hosted was a small thing done right. Folding chairs faced a low granite wall carved with 12 names. White lanterns hung from fishing line between young trees. Children ate orange slices and asked their mothers where the firefighters lived now. And the mothers gave the kind of answers that are true and gentle at once. Eleanor stepped up with a folded page. Her voice wavered on the first sentence and then took its own feet and stood. "I did not know them," she said. "But some days it feels like they shaped the way my life fits around itself. Someone I love taught me that memory is a flame. If we keep it shut in our own hands, it burns out. We share it so it can warm more than one set of fingers." She read each name and let each name settle before lifting the next. When the last one left her mouth, the wind moved through the leaves like a soft answer. She went to the edge of the park where a pine sapling had been planted from a cone taken near the river. She rested her palm on the thin skin of bark. "I am here," she said. "You always liked trees more than people," said a voice behind her, warm and amused. She turned. Mason stood there, a little leaner hair, a little longer. Eyes the same. She reached him, and he held her with the same care he had used when the bank broke. They stood a long time. The crowd behind them made the quiet into something whole. Mason did not go back to the old cabin. There was nothing to rebuild there, but ash and ache. He rented a small place outside town, with a porch that needed paint and a gate that did not close straight. He took shifts with a volunteer crew that walked fire breaks in spring and checked brush in fall. He came home with pine needles caught in his laces and a tired that could sleep. Eleanor met him after meetings at the fund. Some nights they ate eggs for dinner, and tapes of old bluegrass played on a radio that could not decide if it had a good antenna. Some nights they sat on the floor among boxes of case files. She read aloud from notes. He sanded a spoon handle until it fit a hand, as if the wood had always known it would. They did not talk about Charles much. The silence about him was not a wall. It was a bend in a river you cannot see around, yet you know the river keeps going. Once she asked if he still hated her. He looked at her like she had said the wrong math facts on purpose. "I hate things that take people," he said. "I do not hate people who carry names and then set them down." The answer clicked into place like a latch. The fourth memorial came a year later. The park felt bigger because the saplings had learned to throw shade. Eleanor stood near the back and watched families settle, and volunteers tie white ribbons to chairs, and an old dog sleep under a table as if he were keeping the ground warm. A small stir went through the crowd. Two corrections officers walked a few steps behind a man with white hair and a plain suit. There was no tie. That seemed correct. The man was Charles Brooks. People did not clap. People did not boo. Someone drew in a breath as if the day had taken a sudden edge. Charles walked to the small stage. He did not hold paper. He did not look left or right. "I am not here as a title," he said, his voice rough where it had once been polished. "I am here as a man who placed his name where it should not have been, and then protected that name. I thought I was protecting a future. The only future worth protecting is the truth the children of those names can grow under." He looked out, not defiant and not begging. "I ask the families for forgiveness. I ask my daughter for something less than that, and maybe more. I ask to be allowed to keep trying." There was no applause. There was space for breath. Eleanor stood where she was and nodded once, very slight. A river needs direction more than it needs a dam. After the crowd thinned, Eleanor and Mason drove north on a 2-lane, then west on a county road with potholes. The old pine still rose from its slope. At its base they set the ammo box, now empty of letters. Inside they placed a single page. "To those who walked into fire and never walked back out. Your names are not the last word in a short notice. Your names are a Weller town drinks from when it is tired or sad or in need of something strong. Thank you for standing beside the living in a way that makes no sound and needs no witness." They covered the box with needles and a bit of earth. The ground did not swallow the gift. It held it like a palm. Mason took her hand, and under their feet, the soil felt like a floor built by time. They found a small house at the edge of town. The roof wore the tap of rain like a song. The front door stuck in winter and opened easy in June. Neighbors left berries and pies on the stoop without texting first. Children came over to learn how to carve a butter spreader from a scrap. Eleanor showed them how to take a picture of a daisy and make the daisy look as big as a forest. Mail arrived for the fund. Not just requests, stories. A boy who slept in his father's jacket when he missed him. A little girl who wore her mother's helmet on Saturdays because it made her feel brave. Eleanor saved each story in a folder and printed copies to tuck into books, into drawers, into the places you reach when you do not know what you reached for. Sometimes she woke in the night and for a second expected the ceiling of the penthouse and the hum of air through ducts. Then she heard a night train and a dog bark 2 streets over, and Mason breathing even, and knew she had placed her life on ground that would hold. The day of their wedding came without drumbeats. It looked like a community picnic with more flowers and fewer paper plates. The pine sapling in the park had become a tree that could lend an arm of shade. White chairs made straight lines in the grass. On each chair lay a ribbon with a name stitched in simple thread. Not to reopen grief, to confess gratitude, to say we are leaning back and something strong is there. Charles Brooks was allowed to attend with light supervision. He arrived early and stood apart. When Eleanor reached him in a simple dress, he held out his hand. "You saved me too," he said, voice thin but sincere. She smiled, And the smile was not all forgiveness and not all distance. It was the rope in a hand that will not let a person sink. Mason stood at the end of the aisle, in a suit borrowed from a friend, a little loose at the shoulders. He watched her the way a man watches a bend in a river he has travelled for years and still finds beautiful each time it turns. The vows were short. They did not promise a life without pain. They promised to keep telling the story when one of them forgot why they had chosen each other, and to listen when the other one told it. When they kissed children, let go of white cards punched with holes so the breeze could pick them up. Each card carried a name. They rose and drifted, not burning, not falling hard, only moving through light as if the air were water, and they were the leaves of a quiet tree. Winter came soft that year. Snow laid a clean sheet over the porch rail. Inside the cedar comb lived on a shelf above the sink. Eleanor drew it through her hair before she went outside to hang a string of small lights under the eaves. Mason set 2 bowls on the table and ladled stew with the care of a person who does not take having enough for granted. They ate. They cleaned up. He sanded a spoon until it felt like it wanted to be held. She opened a notebook and wrote the first sentence of a new story. Not about quicksand. About a man who learned to come back to a town where people remembered one another by name. She did not know who would read it. She knew someone would need to. Wind moved. Far north, the old pine kept its watch. In the park, the younger pine learned to do the same. Somewhere hands that had once held a hose and a tool and a rope rested on the shoulders of people who could not see them and would have stood straighter if they could. Names did not go dark. They made a small, steady light, the kind that lasts.